Okay, this time let's focus in on this Chrono Blob delay a little bit, and maybe we'll just use a simple voice, this little noise. It's coming here from the Trumor. And so again, we go all the way dry. And then all the way wet. And so one thing I want to be focus in on here, so maybe let's add a scope and we can see a little bit more clearly how things are repeating. And maybe I'll just right there. Okay. Yeah, that's quite low, so I'm gonna just increase the gain a little bit. There we go. Okay. And so right now I've got sync coming in here. So what this is doing, it's actually syncing the delay to that clock input. I think that's coming in from the main clock, which is at 140 BPM. So if we do that, we can see, I'm going to copy this over here. So we can see all of the delay taps are perfectly in sync with our clock, which is clocking all the other elements in our patch. So what that means is the this delay sound is going to keep in sync with all the other elements. If I did not have the sync here, so let's just keep in the scope, we can see what the clock is doing. But then if I kind of move this around a little bit, so you can still maybe get it pretty close, but without this sync, it's much more free form. It's not necessarily going to be in sync with the clock or with all the other elements. When there's not a sync coming in, this style here, this time in milliseconds really matters. So that's the time between each tap of the delay. Once I have the sync, we don't look at the milliseconds. We look at this. You can kind of see it here. So these numbers, 1, 1.5, 2, 3. So these are multiplications of that clock. So like 2 right here would be, the delay would be twice as fast as the sync clock coming in. And then over here on the right, these are dividing sign. So this would be twice as slow or 4 times as slow as the sync clock coming in. So let's grab this again. So now it's set to 2 delay taps per sync clock. We can see that right here. And 4. We'll go on the slower sides. So now for every 2 sync clocks, we've got 1 delay tap. Okay, so that's a cool way to keep everything in sync by adding a clock signal right here into the sync input. We can play with some stereo effects here. Let's do like 2. So delay time left and right, we can switch. So these are slightly different. -50. All right, so now left and right are independent of each other. You get a really separated stereo field. So these other settings, you can play around with that some more on your own. Time modulation mode, a different algorithm for like if you're changing the delay time. Loop would be it grabs this input signal and hangs onto it, and that's what it uses for a delay. Let's see if I can trigger. Okay. So right as this was coming in, right, so I just muted that. Right as this was coming in, I hit loop, so it grabbed that sample at that moment, and it's looping it infinitely. Okay. And then up here, feedback will determine how long that delay kind of feedback loop happens. So very little would be very little delay. It kind of very quickly goes back down to 0. And then a lot of feedback makes it last a long time. And so 100% is right here. So you can notice if we go above 100, that is going to be a recipe for a hurting your ears, maybe. Let's try it. Okay, so I'll go ahead and stop that. So if feedback is above 100%, it's actually getting louder with every delay tap, which means eventually it's going to exponentially, blow out your speakers or not be very pleasant. And maybe that's good enough for this. There's some other tricks with these different modes here. That's a little bit more advanced. Kind of doing a feedback if you want to set it into mono mode, output from the right and then come back in the right. We don't need to really look at that for now. All these inputs, just like anything else, CV could be input into that to modulate all of these settings. So that's the feedback, left delay time, the loop on or off. So if you put a gate into that, it's going to loop the input. Right delay time and dryness or wetness. All those can be modulated. So have fun.